Virgin thought it will be a one-night fling until she got pregnant for the arrogant CEO. Part 2. 3 weeks into their arrangement, Dominic started coming home earlier. Mara noticed the pattern before she let herself acknowledge it. A text around 4 o'clock. Leaving the office. Need anything? Then his key in the door by 5, still wearing his work shirt with the sleeves inevitably rolled up, as though the drive home gave him permission to slowly shed the armor of Dominic Ashford, CEO. Helen says I'm becoming unprofessional, he mentioned one Thursday evening, dropping onto the living room sofa beside where Mara had spread her dissertation notes across the coffee table. He'd brought takeout, Thai food from a place near the university she'd mentioned once, in passing 3 weeks ago. Yeah, she said that? Mara reached for the container of pad Thai, stomach finally cooperating after weeks of nausea. She said I smiled too much. He stretched his arm along the back of the sofa, not quite around her shoulders. Apparently it frightens the junior executives. Mara snorted. Terrifying. I have a reputation to maintain. The ruthless CEO who secretly orders Thai food and researches behavioral economics journals. She glanced sideways at him. You're practically a monster. His laugh was warm, genuine, nothing like the controlled amusement she'd seen at the gallery. This version of Dominic, the one who existed only inside these walls, felt dangerously close to real. They fell into a rhythm after that. Evenings became sacred. Dominic would arrive, shed his professional shell, and somehow gravitate toward wherever Mara was working. And he never demanded her attention. Sometimes he sat across from her in comfortable silence, answering emails while she typed. Other times he'd ask questions about her research with genuine curiosity, listening with an intensity that made her feel truly seen. Explain this concept again, he said one Friday, leaning forward to study her laptop screen. The one about emotional decision-making overriding rational thought. Basically, when emotions are involved, people make choices that contradict their logical self-interest. Mara pulled up a graph on her screen. Fear, love, attachment, these create cognitive biases that rational analysis can't account for. So we're all just walking contradictions pretending to make sense. Welcome to the human condition, she smiled. It's actually beautiful when you think about it. We're messy and illogical and... She trailed off, suddenly aware of how close he was. Close enough to count his eyelashes. Close enough to feel the warmth radiating off his body. Dominic's gaze dropped to her mouth, lingered, rose back to her eyes. Neither of them moved. The breaking point came on a Tuesday when the rain wouldn't stop and Mara's dissertation hit a wall so steep she couldn't see over it. She'd been staring at the same paragraph for 4 hours, the cursor blinking mockingly. Her advisor had sent another email about the defense timeline. Her body ached in ways that pregnancy books warned about but never adequately prepared you for. And the secret, God, the secret was eating her alive. Every morning she woke up knowing today might be the day her stomach betrayed her. Every evening she watched Dominic's tender concern and felt the guilt like a physical wound. By 9 o'clock, the tears came silently. She didn't hear Dominic come home, didn't realize he was there until he appeared in her doorway, still in his charcoal suit, carrying a leather briefcase and wearing an expression of immediate alarm. Mara, he set the briefcase down without breaking eye contact. What happened? Nothing. Everything. I don't know. She wiped her face quickly, embarrassed. I'm sorry. I'm being ridiculous. You're not being ridiculous. He crossed the room slowly, like approaching something fragile. Talk to me. I can't do this. The words tumbled out before she could stop them. The dissertation, the defense, everything is falling apart, and I'm so tired, Dominic. I'm so tired of pretending I have it all together when I don't. I'm tired of being strong all the time, because nobody else is going to be strong for me. I've been taking care of myself since I was 15, since my parents left and there was nobody. Her voice cracked. She pressed her hand against her mouth, horrified at the flood of emotion spilling out. Dominic sat beside her on the bed. Not too close, not touching, just there, steady as a wall. "Tell me about your parents," he said quietly. So she did. The story poured out of her like water from a cracked dam. How her mother had walked out first, chasing a man to another country without so much as a goodbye. How her father had tried for 2 years before the grief swallowed him and he disappeared into a bottle, then disappeared entirely. How 15-year-old Mara had learned to cook, clean, pay bills, and smile at teachers who asked if everything was okay at home. "I became an expert at performing wellness," she laughed bitterly, at looking like everything was fine when nothing was. "It's probably why I chose behavioral economics. I wanted to understand why people lie to themselves, why we create these elaborate fictions to survive. Because the truth is too heavy to carry alone," Dominic said. His voice was rough, stripped of its usual smoothness. Mara looked at him, really looked, and saw something in his expression she hadn't seen before. Not just sympathy, but recognition. The look of someone who knew exactly how heavy that weight felt. "You know," she whispered. Dominic was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached for her hand, slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. When she didn't, his fingers interlaced with hers, warm and steady. "I was 19 when I found out about my parents' finances," he began. "Everyone assumed they were wealthy. Good family, nice house, club memberships. But it was all borrowed, mortgaged, fake." He swallowed. "When they died, I inherited nothing but shame. Creditors calling every day, neighbors whispering. The family friends who'd come to every birthday party suddenly couldn't remember my name. Dominic, I built this."
If you're enjoying the story so far, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel grow and lets me keep bringing you more amazing love stories. All right, back to the story.
Empire because I was terrified. His thumb traced slow circles on the back of her hand. Terrified that if I didn't become untouchable, the world would destroy me like it destroyed them. Every acquisition, every deal, every cold decision, it was armor. And it worked. I was safe. He turned to face her, and Mara's breath caught at the raw vulnerability in his gray eyes. "But you make me want to take the armor off," he continued, barely above a whisper. "And that terrifies me more than anything else ever has." The rain drummed against the windows. The room felt impossibly small, impossibly intimate. Just two broken people holding hands in the dark, their wounds laid bare. "We're quite a pair," Mara murmured. "The worst," Dominic agreed. But he was smiling, that sad, boyish smile from the balcony, the real one. "A man who built walls out of money and a woman who built them out of strength. And here we are, tearing them down. Here we are." Dominic squeezed her hand. He didn't lean in, didn't try to kiss her, didn't make it into something more than what it was. Two people choosing, in this quiet moment, to be honest with each other. And it felt more intimate than any kiss could have. Later, after Dominic had made her herbal tea and retreated to his side of the penthouse with a gentle good night, Mara lay in bed staring at the ceiling. She placed both hands on her stomach, where the smallest curve had begun to form beneath her skin, invisible to anyone who wasn't looking for it, but impossible for her to ignore. "I'm going to tell him," she whispered to the darkness, to the tiny life growing inside her. "Soon, I promise." But even as she said it, she knew the truth was becoming more complicated than a simple confession. Because now telling Dominic about the baby meant risking something she hadn't planned on having. His heart. The board dinner was Dominic's idea. "It's the final test," he'd explained over breakfast. She's sliding a folder across the kitchen counter with the ease of a man who conducted negotiations over scrambled eggs. "Marcus Webb, 3 board members, and their spouses. One evening. If we convince them, The acquisition gets approved, and everything I've been working toward finally happens. Mara opened the folder. Inside was an itinerary, a guest list, and a carefully curated evening mapped out in 30-minute intervals. Dominic's world reduced to efficiency. Even romance had a schedule. "What do I wear?" she asked, flipping through the pages. "Helen has already arranged options in your closet." He paused, watching her over his coffee cup. "You don't have to do this. I can tell them you're unwell." "I made a deal," Mara said firmly. "I'm keeping it." Mara's outfit, a floor-length gown in deep burgundy velvet, fitted elegantly through the bodice with a subtle empire waist that artfully disguised her growing bump, now visible enough that certain dresses would betray her secret. The neckline was modest but sophisticated, with delicate gold jewelry at her ears and throat. Her dark hair was swept up loosely, a few strands framing her face softly. Understated gold heels completed the look, elegant, warm, magnetic. Dominic's outfit, a perfectly tailored navy midnight suit with a crisp white shirt and a deep burgundy tie that Helen had clearly chosen to complement Mara's dress. His shoes were polished black leather, his watch a simple gold piece. Understated wealth, deliberate and confident. When he saw Mara descend the hallway toward him, his hand tightened around his champagne glass, hard enough to make his knuckles pale. Yet the restaurant was old-world elegant. Dark wood, candlelight, white tablecloths that whispered money and tradition. Dominic's hand found the small of Mara's back the moment they entered, warm and grounding, a silent anchor. "You look stunning," he murmured, leaning close enough that his breath ghosted her ear. "Every person in this room is going to wonder how I managed to convince you to be here with me." "Maybe they'll think you're paying me," Mara whispered back. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Don't joke about that." The evening started beautifully. Mara charmed Marcus Webb's wife, Eleanor, with genuine warmth and sharp wit. She navigated board member questions with the same strategic ease she applied to her research, reading emotional cues, offering just enough personal detail to seem open without revealing anything real. Dominic watched her from across the table with an expression Helen later described as completely gone. Halfway through the main course, Eleanor Webb leaned toward Mara conspiratorially. "You know, dear, I've known Dominic since he was barely out of college. Never once seen him look at someone the way he looks at you." Mara's heart swelled, then ached. "He's a good man. He's a complicated man." Eleanor squeezed her hand. "But I think you might be exactly what he needs." The words settled in Mara's chest like stones, beautiful and heavy. It was Marcus who destroyed everything. He'd had too much wine, enough to loosen the careful diplomacy he wore, like a second skin, enough to make his curiosity sharper, more careless. "So, Mara," he said, leaning back in his chair with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, "if Dominic tells us you're finishing your doctorate, impressive stuff, but I have to ask," he glanced at Dominic, then back at her, "how long exactly have you two been together?" "About 2 months," Mara answered smoothly. 2 months. Marcus nodded slowly, swirling his wine. "And in those 2 months, has Dominic told you about the company's prenatal benefits package?" "We updated it last quarter. Very generous. Covers everything." The table went quiet. Mara's blood turned to ice. "Marcus?" Dominic's voice cut through like a blade. "That's hardly dinner conversation." "Isn't it?" Marcus's eyes stayed fixed on Mara, on her face, which had gone completely white. "I'm merely asking because my assistant mentioned seeing Miss Chen at Dr. Patricia Hayes' office last week. Dr. Hayes is, of course, our company's preferred OBGYN. Wonderful doctor. Specializes in high-risk pregnancies." The silence that followed was devastating. Mara couldn't breathe, couldn't move, couldn't look at Dominic because she knew, with absolute certainty, that his face would be wearing an expression she couldn't bear to see. Mara. Dominic's voice was quiet, dangerously quiet. Is there something you need to tell me? She closed her eyes. The candlelight flickered. Every carefully constructed wall she'd built over 26 years of surviving alone trembled. Yes, she whispered. The car ride home was the longest 15 minutes of Mara's life. Dominic drove himself, another sign that something had broken. He never drove himself. The silence between them was suffocating, thick with everything unsaid and everything that had just been torn open in front of strangers. How far along? His voice was flat, so controlled. The voice he used in boardrooms, not bedrooms. Almost 10 weeks. His hands tightened on the steering wheel. Since that night, the first night, yes. Another silence. Longer this time. You knew. Not a question. When you came to my office, when you agreed to this arrangement, you already knew. Yes. There was no point in lying anymore. I found out the same morning you texted me. Dominic didn't look at her. His jaw was set so tight she could see the muscle working beneath his skin. 6 weeks, he said. You kept this from me for 6 weeks. I was scared. Of what? Of this. Her voice cracked. Of exactly this reaction. Of you looking at me the way you're looking at me right now. He finally glanced at her, and what she saw in his eyes wasn't anger. It was worse. It was hurt. Deep, bewildered. Betrayal-shaped hurt that made her chest physically ache. I trusted you, he said. I told you things I've never told anyone. I opened up to you. His voice faltered, something cracking beneath the surface. And you were carrying my child this entire time, and you didn't think I deserved to know? I didn't know how. You could have just said it, Mara. Could I? She turned to face him, tears streaming down her cheeks, still wearing the burgundy dress that suddenly felt like a costume. Could I really have just said it? Oh, by the way, that one night we spent together, I got pregnant. Also, I'm a virgin, was a virgin, and this is my first relationship, and I have no idea what I'm doing, and I was terrified you'd think I trapped you. Dominic pulled the car to the side of the road, stopped the engine. The city hummed outside, indifferent to the war happening inside this small, enclosed space. Did you? He asked quietly. Think I'd believe that? Wouldn't you have? He didn't answer. That silence was its own answer. They sat in the darkened car, the space between them feeling wider than it ever had. Mara's hands trembled in her lap. The burgundy velvet of her dress suddenly felt heavy, suffocating, beautiful armor for a battle she'd already lost. I need some time, Dominic said finally. His voice was rough, stripped of everything warm. To think. Okay. I'll have Helen arrange a hotel for you tonight. The words landed like a slap. Not cruel exactly. Worse, practical, efficient. The Dominic who built empires and closed deals. Not the Dominic who held her hand in the dark and told her she made him want to take his armor off. Okay, Mara whispered again. When the car pulled up to the penthouse, Dominic got out first and opened her door, the gesture so instinctively courteous it made her want to weep. He didn't touch her, didn't meet her eyes. Helen will be in touch, he said. Mara stepped out into the cold night air, the burgundy dress swaying around her ankles. She opened her mouth. To say what? Sorry. Please. Stay. But Dominic was already walking away, and the penthouse door closed behind him with a sound that felt, in that moment, like everything ending. The hotel room was beautiful and absolutely destroyed her. Not because it was cold or impersonal, it was the opposite. Helen, bless her, had thought of everything. Fresh flowers on the nightstand, a basket of ginger candies for the nausea, a cashmere blanket in soft gray draped across the bed, not a note in Helen's neat handwriting. He chose this place because it has the best view of the sunrise. He thought you might need something beautiful to wake up to. Mara read the note 3 times before the tears came again. She changed out of the burgundy dress slowly, hanging it carefully in the closet like a ghost of the evening she wished had gone differently. The hotel provided soft white pajamas, thick cotton, impossibly comfortable, and Mara sank into them gratefully, pulling her knees up to her chest on the enormous bed. Her phone stayed silent all night. Casey arrived the next morning like a hurricane in human form, armed with terrible gas station coffee and a fury that made Mara almost smile. "He sent you to a hotel?" Casey dropped onto the bed beside her, still wearing yesterday's paint-stained overalls and a jacket that had seen better decades. He needed space. Mara's voice was hoarse from crying and a night without sleep. "I can't blame him, Casey. I lied to him. For weeks. You were protecting yourself." Same thing from his perspective. Casey studied her friend with those sharp artist's eyes. "How are you feeling? The baby?" Mara's hand drifted to her stomach, a gesture that had become instinctive, automatic, a small private conversation with the life growing inside her. "Fine. Tired. Guilty." "Have you eaten?" "I'm not hungry." "Eat anyway." Casey produced a granola bar from somewhere mysterious and thrust it into Mara's hand. "You're growing a human. Feed the human." Despite everything, Mara laughed. They sat in silence for a while, the way only people who'd survived adolescence together could. Casey didn't push, didn't offer hollow reassurances. Just sat, solid and present, while Mara stared at the sunrise through the window, the one Dominic had specifically chosen for her. "Do you love him?" Casey asked eventually quietly. The question landed in Mara's chest like a stone dropping into still water. She felt the ripples spread outward, touching everything. "I think I do," she whispered. "And that's the terrifying part. Because I didn't come into this expecting to feel anything. It was supposed to be a deal, an arrangement, something manageable and safe and temporary. And instead he became the person I want to tell everything to, the person I want to wake up next to. Honey, the person who makes me feel like maybe being broken isn't the same as being alone." Her voice cracked. "And I might have ruined it." Casey wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "Or you might have given it a chance to be real." 2 days passed. Mara threw herself into her dissertation with frantic energy, typing until her fingers ached, filling pages with analysis and arguments that barely required conscious thought. Her mind was on autopilot, the academic part anyway. The rest of her was stuck in a loop, replaying Dominic's face in the car, the way his voice had gone flat, the careful distance he'd maintained when he opened her door. On the third morning, Helen called. "He hasn't slept," Helen said without preamble, her voice unusually soft. "In 3 days. He's been in the office around the clock. I've never seen him like this." Mara's heart clenched. "Helen, I don't think—" "I'm not calling to take sides." A pause. "I'm calling because I've worked for that man for 7 years. I've watched him close billion-dollar deals without blinking. I've seen him stare down hostile boardrooms and walk away laughing. And in 3 days, you have done more damage to Dominic Ashford than anything or anyone in his entire life." "I never wanted to hurt him." "I know, dear." Helen's voice was gentle. "That's exactly why I'm calling. He won't reach out. His pride won't let him. He's convinced he doesn't deserve to ask for what he actually wants." "What does he want?" Helen was quiet for a moment. Then, "Go to the office, not today. Give him one more day, but go. And when you do, don't apologize first. Tell him what you feel. Or not what you did wrong, what you feel. That's the only language he understands." Mara spent that extra day preparing, not a speech exactly, but a settling, a quiet internal reckoning with everything she'd been running from. She sat by the hotel window, watching the city move below her, and let herself feel it all. The fear, the guilt, the love that had crept in so quietly she hadn't noticed until it was the loudest thing in the room. She called her thesis advisor, told him the truth, not all of it, but enough. Dr. Morrison, surprisingly, was nothing but supportive. Life happens, Ms. Chen. Your work speaks for itself. Take the time you need. She called Casey, who answered with characteristic bluntness. About time you stopped spiraling and started fighting. She even called the OBGYN's office to schedule her next appointment. A small, practical act that somehow felt like the bravest thing she'd done in weeks. She was keeping this baby. She'd known that from the beginning, really. But now the knowing felt solid, certain, a foundation to build everything else on. That evening, she stood in front of the bathroom mirror and studied her reflection carefully. The woman looking back wasn't the frightened girl who'd stared at two pink lines in a cramped apartment bathroom weeks ago. She was tired, yes, scared, still. But there was something else now, a quiet steel in her eyes, a determination that hadn't been there before. Tomorrow, she told her reflection, you tell him everything, and whatever happens, you stop running. The morning arrived gray and overcast, the kind of sky that couldn't decide between rain and reluctant sunshine. Mara dressed with intention, a soft cream cashmere sweater that fell just past her hips, dark tailored pants, and simple brown leather boots. No armor, no performance. She left her hair down, loose around her shoulders, and wore no jewelry except a simple gold chain her grandmother had given her years ago. She looked like herself, entirely, uncomplicatedly herself. Helen met her in the lobby of Tech Solutions International with a cup of herbal tea and an expression of quiet relief. He's upstairs, she said simply. And Mara? Yes? He moved your books back into the penthouse last night. All of them. Personally. Wouldn't let anyone help. Helen's eyes were suspiciously bright. Make of that what you will. Mara's breath caught. She wrapped both hands around the warm cup of tea and nodded, not trusting her voice. And the elevator ride felt eternal. Mara watched the numbers climb. 10, 15, 20, 30, 40. Each floor bringing her closer to the conversation that would either heal everything or break it permanently. She thought about the balcony where it all started, the elevator where the deal was struck, the bedroom where two broken people held hands in the dark. Every moment had led here. The doors opened. Dominic stood by the window, the same position as their very first meeting, but everything about him looked different. His shirt was wrinkled, sleeves rolled unevenly. His hair was disheveled in a way she'd never seen. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. He looked like a man who'd been fighting himself and losing. When he turned and saw her, something in his expression crumbled, just for a second, before he rebuilt it into careful, guarded neutrality. Ah, Mara, her name, his rough voice, the same two syllables that had been undoing her for weeks. She set the tea down on his desk, straightened her spine, remembered Helen's advice. Don't apologize first. Tell him what you feel. Before I say anything else, she began, her voice steady despite the earthquake happening inside her chest. I need you to know something. Not about the baby, not about what I did or didn't tell you, about us. Dominic's jaw tightened. He didn't move. I fell in love with you, Mara said simply. Somewhere between the Thai takeout and the Rothko painting, and the night you held my hand and told me you wanted to take your armor off. I fell in love with you, and I was so terrified of losing you that I held on to the one secret that I thought would keep me safe. Her voice wavered. She let it. It didn't keep me safe. It almost destroyed the best thing that's ever happened to me. And I'm sorry, not because I owe you an apology, but because you deserve better than my fear. You deserve my trust, and I want to give it to you now. All of it. No more secrets. The silence stretched between them, vast, trembling, alive. Dominic stared at her for a long moment. Then something shifted in his expression. The walls crumbling, piece by piece, like a dam giving way to water that had been pressing against it for far too long. Say that again, he whispered. Which part? The part where you love me? Dearest viewers, when someone finally stops running and turns back to face the scariest moment of their life, what gives them the courage? Is it love or the fear of losing it forever? The part where you love me, Mara repeated softly. Dominic closed his eyes. Yeah, and when he opened them, something had fundamentally shifted, like tectonic plates settling after an earthquake, the landscape completely remade. He crossed the space between them in 3 strides, stopping close enough that Mara could see the exhaustion etched into every line of his face, could smell cedar and something warm beneath it, could feel the slight tremor running through his body. I haven't slept in 3 days, he said, his voice wrecked and raw. I know, Helen told me. Of course she did. A ghost of a smile. I've been sitting in this office running every possible scenario in my head, every version of how this could go, every outcome, every variable, every possible. He stopped, pressed both hands over his face, laughed, a broken, disbelieving sound. God, listen to me. Oh, I'm trying to apply boardroom logic to the fact that I'm in love with you, and it's completely, utterly useless. Mara's breath caught. What did you just say? You heard me. He dropped his hands. His gray eyes, those devastating, searching eyes, found hers with an intensity that made her knees weak. I'm in love with you, Mara Chen. I have been since the balcony, probably. Maybe before. And when Marcus said those things at dinner, I wasn't angry at you for keeping the secret. You seemed angry. I was angry at myself. His voice cracked on the confession. Because somewhere in the back of my mind, I'd already figured it out. The nausea, the water instead of champagne, the way you touched your stomach when you thought I wasn't watching. Oh, I noticed all of it, and I didn't say anything because I was terrified of what it meant. Terrified how? Dominic reached for her hand, slowly, carefully, the way he always did, giving her every chance to pull away. Terrified that if I acknowledged it, I'd have to acknowledge how desperately I wanted it to be true. A baby. Our baby. The one thing I never allowed myself to want, because wanting things made you vulnerable, and vulnerability got my parents killed. The tears came before Mara could stop them. Not sad tears, the overwhelming, chest-expanding kind that came when something you'd been carrying alone suddenly had someone else's hands underneath it. Dominic, let me finish. He squeezed her hand. Please. I know I've been rehearsing this for 72 sleepless hours, and if I stop now, I might not start again. Mara laughed through her tears and nodded. I went back to the penthouse that night and I sat in your room, he continued, the guest room where you'd been working on your dissertation, and I looked at everything you'd left behind. Your notes, your books, your terrible coffee mug with the chipped handle that you refused to throw away. And I realized something. What? That I'd been building a life for 5 years and none of it meant anything until you were in it. His thumb traced slow circles on the back of her hand, the same gesture from the bedroom that night. The empire, the deals, the penthouse. I built all of it to fill a hole I didn't even know was there. And then you walked into my life carrying champagne and a terrible joke about escape routes, and suddenly the hole started closing. Mara closed the distance between them, lifted her free hand to his face, touched the dark circles beneath his eyes, the sharp line of his jaw, the slight stubble that spoke of days without sleep or care. He leaned into her touch like a man starved for contact. I moved your books back, he said quietly. Helen mentioned that. All of them, every single one, including the one about cognitive biases that you left a bookmark in at page 247. A vulnerable, almost boyish smile. I read the chapter you were on, twice, because it was the closest I could get to being near you. Something enormous and warm and terrifying bloomed in Mara's chest. She rose onto her toes and pressed her forehead against his. The gentlest possible collision, a whispered point of contact that felt like coming home. I'm sorry, she breathed, for the secret, for being afraid, for not trusting you enough to stop. Dominic's hand came up to cradle the back of her head, fingers tangling in her loose hair. No more apologies. We both ran. We both hid. We both built walls so high we forgot there was a world on the other side. His forehead stayed pressed against hers. The only thing that matters now is that we're here, both of us, choosing this. Choosing this, Mara echoed. So let me choose. His voice dropped to barely a whisper. Let me choose you. Let me choose this baby. Let me choose the messy, terrifying, completely illogical thing that we are. Not because of a deal or a board or a 6-month arrangement, because you are the first real thing that has ever happened to me. Mara pulled back just enough to look at him. Really look, the way she had on that very first balcony night, when a lost man with sad eyes had made her feel precious for the first time in her life. I choose you too, she said. All of it. The armor and the wounds and the terrible compliments and the... He kissed her. Not the way he had that first night, hungry and desperate and searching. This kiss was slow, deliberate, the kind of kiss that felt like a promise being made in real time, tender and thorough and devastating in its gentleness. His hand stayed cradling the back of her head, the other sliding to rest against her waist, careful, reverent. Like she was something miraculous he couldn't quite believe he was allowed to hold. When they finally pulled apart, Mara was crying again and laughing at the same time, and Dominic was smiling, genuinely, fully, the kind of smile that transformed his entire face into something warm and young and utterly disarming. So, he said, slightly breathless, about this baby. Mara's hand moved to her stomach. Dominic's followed, settling over hers, his larger hand warm and steady, and something in his expression shifted into something so tender and reverent that Mara had to bite her lip to keep from dissolving entirely. I want to be there for everything, he said quietly. Every appointment, every scan, every 3 a.m. craving, and every terrifying moment. Not as a CEO, not as someone fulfilling an obligation. His eyes lifted to hers. As the father, as the man who loves you, if you'll let me. I'll let you, Mara whispered. They didn't go back to the penthouse that day. Instead, Dominic did something Mara had never seen him do before. He canceled everything, cleared his entire schedule with one phone call to Helen, who responded with an audible sigh of relief and what sounded suspiciously like a happy cry. Where are we going? Mara asked as they stepped into the elevator together, hands intertwined. Somewhere that has nothing to do with boardrooms or hotel rooms or deals? He lifted their joined hands and pressed a kiss to her knuckles. I want to take you somewhere real. He drove them out of the city, past the glass towers and manicured boulevards, past the world of expensive suits and hostile acquisitions, into the quiet countryside where the road curved between rolling hills and bare winter trees. The gray sky had cleared just enough to let thin ribbons of gold filter through, painting the landscape in warm, unexpected light. They stopped at a small cafe overlooking a frost-covered meadow. Nothing fancy, mismatched chairs, checkered tablecloths, a menu written in chalk on a blackboard behind the counter. The kind of place that existed in a world completely separate from everything Dominic had built. This is where I used to study, he said, sliding into a booth by the window. When I was in college, before everything got complicated, I used to sit right here and believe that I could build something that mattered. He looked out at the meadow, something soft and unguarded in his expression. I forgot what that felt like, but all until recently. Mara slid in across from him, wrapping her hands around a cup of chamomile tea the waitress had brought without being asked. The cafe was warm, unhurried, smelling of fresh bread and ground coffee. Outside, the frost caught the afternoon light and turned the meadow into something from a painting. "Tell me about this place," she said. So he did. Stories tumbled out of him, real ones, not the curated narratives he delivered to boardrooms. The college friend who'd talked him out of dropping out, the professor who'd believed in him when nobody else did. The night he'd sat in this exact booth and mapped out the first version of tech solutions on a napkin, terrified and exhilarated in equal measure. "You were never just the ruthless CEO," Mara said softly, watching him. The way his eyes lit up when he talked about the past, like the way his shoulders had dropped from their permanent defensive tension. "This is who you actually are." "This is who I became again," he corrected, "because of you." They talked for hours, about everything, about nothing, about the baby, its name, what it might look like, how terrified they both were, and how that terror felt less like a burden when they carried it together. Dominic asked careful questions about the pregnancy, listening with an attention that made Mara's chest ache with tenderness. He remembered details she'd mentioned in passing, the ginger crackers, the nausea, the way certain smells made her dizzy, and wove them into a tapestry of care so complete it took her breath away. "I have a confession," he said as the afternoon light turned golden and long. "On another one? I never actually had a problem with the board." A sheepish, almost guilty smile. "The acquisition would have gone through regardless. Marcus's vote didn't matter." Mara stared at him. "Then why did you—" "Because I wanted an excuse." He reached across the table, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. Their gesture, the one that had started everything. "An excuse to ask you to stay, an excuse to have you in my life, an excuse to pretend I had a reason to need you when the truth was—" He swallowed. "The truth was I needed you from the moment you smiled at me on that balcony." The confession hung between them, sweet and devastating and so utterly, beautifully human that Mara felt something crack open inside her chest. Not breaking, blooming. "You absolute idiot," she said, laughing through tears. "Heck, I know. You built an entire fake arrangement, I know, just to spend time with me. In my defense, I'm very good at deals." He squeezed her hand, his expression shifting from sheepish to something deeper, warmer, more serious. "And this one turned out to be the best I've ever made." They drove back as the sun set, painting the sky in impossible shades of amber and rose. Mara leaned against the window, watching the landscape blur past, one hand resting on her stomach where the smallest flutter of something, hope, maybe, or magic, or just the beginning of a life that would change everything, stirred beneath her palm. "Hey," Dominic said quietly, glancing across at her. Move back in tonight?" Mara smiled. Was that a question or a command? A desperate, the completely transparent plea from a man who doesn't want to sleep alone for one more night. "Then yes." She reached across the console and laced her fingers through his. "Yes to everything." The penthouse felt different when they walked through the door together. Warmer, fuller, like the space had been holding its breath and finally exhaled. Mara's books were exactly where Dominic had placed them. Not just relocated, but arranged. Organized by subject, then by author. A careful system that spoke of hours spent handling her things with reverence. Her chipped coffee mug sat on the kitchen counter, freshly washed, positioned exactly where she always left it. "You didn't have to do all this," she said, running her fingers along the spines of her books. "I know." Dominic appeared behind her, arms sliding around her waist from behind, a chin resting on her shoulder. "But I wanted to. I wanted you to walk in and know that you belong here, that this isn't a guest room anymore." Mara turned in his arms to face him. "What is it then?" "Ours." The word was simple, quiet, and carried the weight of everything they'd survived to get here. All of it. The penthouse, the books, The terrible coffee mug, the baby, the future, ours. She pressed up on her toes and kissed him, softly, sweetly. A kiss that tasted like chamomile tea in the cafe in the golden afternoon, and every single moment that had led them from a rainy balcony to this exact place in each other's lives. When they pulled apart, Dominic pressed his lips to her forehead and held her close. One hand splayed gently across her stomach where their child was growing, tiny and miraculous, and already, impossibly, we're the most loved thing in the world. Thank you, he murmured into her hair. For what? For not running, for being brave enough to come back, for choosing the messy, terrifying, completely illogical thing. A pause, a smile she could hear in his voice. For making me remember what it feels like to be human. Outside, the city glittered beneath them, vast and indifferent and beautiful. But here, in this penthouse with its warm light and rearranged bookshelves, and the quiet miracle of two broken people choosing each other, the world felt exactly the right size. Mara closed her eyes and let herself feel it. The safety, the warmth, the bone-deep certainty that she was exactly where she was supposed to be. For the first time in her life, the careful girl who had survived alone wasn't alone anymore. And for the first time in his life, the ruthless CEO who had built walls out of money had finally, completely let someone in. And so, two people who thought they were destined to walk through life alone, one hiding behind strength, one hiding behind success, found each other in the messiest, most unexpected way possible. Sometimes the best love stories aren't the ones that make sense. They're the ones that choose each other anyway. Dearest viewers, what would you have done differently, Mara or Dominic? Did their ending feel earned to you? Share your thoughts below. We'd love to hear yours. The end.